The sun had barely climbed high when the first sirens came. A neighbor called 911 and spoke in short, sharp sentences, telling the dispatcher there was a child in the car on a hot morning and the child was not moving. Men and women in bright uniforms ran across a small driveway. A firefighter smashed a window with a gloved hand. Someone lifted the car door and reached into the back seat. For a moment, everything stopped. The sound of engines, the rustle of leaves, even the breath of people close by seemed to quiet down. The small body in the car was still. Paramedics worked quickly, their faces serious. They checked for any sign of life and moved with care. Parents who heard the news gathered on the sidewalk and prayed. That moment was the worst of the day, the part that makes people shake when they remember it later, and it will always be the place this story begins. But before that terrible moment, there was another morning that looked ordinary. Ryan Cooper woke up to the same sound the family had heard many days before, the alarm on his phone, the soft noise of the baby monitor, the sliver of light through the curtains. Ryan lived with his little boy and the child's mother in a small house on a quiet street. The house had toys on the floor, a stroller by the door, and a small backpack that Ryan used for work things. He had a job that asked him to be on time. He had a life full of small duties, feeding a child, putting on a tie, making sure 2 different people got where they needed to be. On that morning, the day looked like it would be the same as many others. Ryan kissed the child's forehead, or so the family later said in interviews. He packed a bag and left the house. The baby, only months old, slept in the back car seat during the short trip to Ryan's work. The sun warmed the windshield. A co-worker later said Ryan seemed distracted that day. He answered questions slowly and kept checking his phone. Later, friends would say they saw his face and it looked tired, the way tired faces look after nights with little sleep and long days. No one could know in that small moment how fast the day would turn. At work, the first hours passed like clockwork. Ryan checked in, took notes, and answered calls. He met with people and did the tasks he was paid to do. Time slid forward. Outside, the temperature rose. Inside the car, glass and paint held the heat, like a small oven. The infant, buckled inside a child's seat, slept through noises that would wake most children. When people come back to this part of the story later, they often ask the same hard question. How could a child be left in a hot car? Many simple answers try to fit together like puzzle pieces. A tired brain, a broken routine, a change in a usual day. In many cases like this, people do things they would never expect to do, and the results are terrible. That day, Ryan's day changed the way he often forgot small things. He had new stress. He was on a schedule different from the one he normally had. Instead of dropping the child at a daycare he trusted, he had a different plan. He thought he could leave the baby asleep for a little while. He meant to return fast. He believed it would be safe for a short time. He promised himself it would be fine. That promise is where the story grows heavy, because small promises can break on hot days. While Ryan walked into the office, the child stayed in the car. The minutes ticked into an hour. The sun climbed higher and the air inside the car grew thick. People on the sidewalk passed without knowing. Inside the parked car, the baby stirred. A small hand moved and then fell still. The car's inside temperature rose quickly. The baby could not tell his body what was happening. When Ryan finally remembered, and he did remember, but the time had already slipped too far, he did what any parent would do. He ran. He dropped what he was holding and ran back to the parking lot, where his car sat like a small metal oven. He found the door locked. A security guard had noticed the car and called for help. A woman in the building across the street saw a man running and thought it was an emergency. She ran to call in. By the time help arrived, the sun had been high for hours. The neighbor who called 911 later said his voice shook when he described the scene to the dispatcher. That is where this chapter stops for the first time, at the moment when help reached the car and the small, quiet body inside was taken into the hands of trained people. The chapter stops just before the outcome was announced to the waiting crowd, and it leaves a question heavy in the air. Would the baby live or die? People standing on the sidewalk remember hearing a loud exhale, the kind people make when they cannot hold their breath any longer. The silence after that exhale felt like a long, empty room. That pause is where the story rests and waits for the next step. But to know how this happened and why, we must go back and look at the little details of the days and people leading up to that quiet moment. Ryan Cooper had a life that looked ordinary, but had pressure built into it. He worked a job that required his presence. He also had bills to pay and a child who needed constant attention. The baby's mother worked different hours, and sometimes Ryan took the child to work when she could not. The baby was small and perfect, with chubby hands that grabbed at blanket corners. Many mornings, Ryan managed a routine. He fed the child, buckled him into the car seat, and drove with the baby asleep. That morning, something new was different, a change in routine. Maybe I had to stop for gas, meet a client, or run into the store on the way in. Maybe he was asked to be somewhere earlier than usual. Small changes can push a person to the edge of forgetting something big. People who study accidents like this call them tragic errors. The brain is very good at routine. If you always do a then be, your brain will guide your body almost automatically. If you change the order, if the child is not dropped off as usual, or if you go to a new place instead of the same daycare, your brain may skip the step you always take. That is how a loving person like Ryan, who cared for his child, could make the terrible mistake of leaving the baby in the back seat for too long. After the emergency, friends and family tried to understand. They said Ryan loved the child and had never shown signs of being careless. They said he was a good father who made a single, terrible choice on a day where his attention slipped. The police arrived and began a slow, careful process. They took statements, not to punish but to learn. They spoke to people who saw Ryan that morning. They checked security cameras and phone records. The investigators asked many questions that sound small but are important. What time was the car left? Where did Ryan go in the building? Who saw him last? They gathered the small facts and waited for lab reports about the baby's condition. For everyone who loved the child, the waiting was heavy and sharp like a winter wind. The hospital doctors did their work with quiet hands. They told the family what they could in clear words. The baby had been inside a hot car for a long time. The body had suffered the heat, and sometimes the damage a child's body takes in such conditions is very fast and very hard to reverse. The doctors spoke not to blame, but to explain. They told the family about how young bodies lose water quickly and how the brain and heart can be harmed in intense heat. For the family, those facts were like stones that settled in a pool. They made ripples that would not stop. After the child's death, and it is important to say this gently and without detail, a legal and community response followed. Police opened an investigation to learn exactly what happened and whether the event was a mistake or something worse. Friends and neighbors watched the process and tried to hold the family close. The news spread across local websites and social media. People who read the headlines felt a tightness in their chests and said small prayers for the baby and the family. Some people reacted with anger and called for harsh punishment. Others reached out to offer help and counsel to a family broken by grief. The reaction was mixed because the story touched so many different feelings: sorrow, anger, confusion, and the simple human desire to protect children. At the center of the public discussion were hard questions that people ask after any tragedy of this kind. How can we prevent a child from being left in a car? What safety steps can parents and caregivers take? Many experts suggested practical measures. Put a shoe or a note in the front seat to remind the driver that a child is in the back. Use alarms that alert when a child is left, or create routines that make dropping a child at daycare the first step before going anywhere else. Employers were urged to be understanding when parents had family emergencies or worries. Daycare centers and schools considered doing more outreach to help families in need of support. These ideas came from people who wanted a world where such a painful mistake would be less likely. For Ryan, the day changed everything. Friends said he was quiet and seemed lost. He spoke sometimes, his voice small and broken, telling people he had made the worst mistake of his life. He asked for forgiveness and for help. Some people reached out and offered counseling. Others kept their distance, unsure what to do when someone they knew had caused a death. It is a heavy space to stand in, the space between public judgment and private grief. Many who see similar stories say the best help is to listen and to offer support for long-term changes, not only quick anger. Before the law moved forward, There were public statements from community leaders and child safety advocates. They asked for better systems to protect children, such as public awareness campaigns and technology, to remind parents and caregivers when a seatbelt secures a small child. These ideas are small steps, but they are meant to grow into changes that might save lives in the future. People kept talking because the most painful thing about a tragedy is that it can feel like it happened for no reason. When people act, they try to carve meaning from pain by making things safer for others. This chapter ends on an important moment: the funeral and a small memorial held by the family. People came to the service with flowers and folded hands. They remembered the child's tiny laugh and the soft way he slept. They held each other and said prayers. For Ryan, those moments were both the hardest and the most human he'd ever known. The plain truth of losing a child, the raw ache that does not go away. Outside the funeral, the community promised to work for change. Inside, the family asked for privacy and time to grieve. When the chapter closes, the reader can feel both the sharp pain and the slow, heavy work that follows a tragedy like this. The questions remain: what will the investigation show? Will the community find better ways to help families under stress? Will Ryan find a path to live with what happened? Those answers come later, one by one, as the days go on. For now, the story rests on that hot morning, the quick arrival of help, and the silence that followed, a silence that asks everyone who hears it to look at how we care for children and how we support the very human, very imperfect people who try to do their best.